Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, TNS Lanka's latest service suggests that by and large, Sri Lankans view the government's budget proposals in a favourable light. Benchmark's Anushan Selvaraja now attempts to analyse the sentiments expressed by the public as they participated in the exclusive LMD commissioned nationwide survey.
Welcome to the Voice of Business. Joining me on the show is the country manager for TNS Lanka, Kunal Sharma. Now, Kunal, although 52% of the latest nationwide poll view budget 2012 in a positive light, 45% do not agree. What sensitivities could have led to this difference in opinion?
Well, first of all, Anushan, I think it takes a bit of time for the entire appreciation of the budget to percolate through. Initially, people tend to react on the one or two facts that they've clearly picked up and which are more relevant to them. Having said that, it's also important to consider that there are a lot of different constituencies, so to speak, in the market. Different set of such people react differently. So, for example, the way the public sector employees would have reacted would be very different, on things like the state sector salaries, for example. The way the private sector would have reacted would be very different based on what kind of reforms, what kind of further movements the government has planned. So, I think that is exactly what has led to this kind of fragmented response.
Now, 26% of those interviewed say that they do not know if the government will meet its income and expenditure targets, and 40% say they will, and a further 34% say an outright no. Any thoughts as to why the findings are so diverse?
If you look at the typical trends of government budgeting, income and expenditure, the target versus what actually happens at the end of the year, the past track record obviously shows that in most cases, governments tend to miss that target. So having said this, I am actually fairly surprised at the 40% who say they actually will rather than anything else. Having said this, I think it also depends on the viewpoint that people have. In terms of, there is definitely a set of optimists in the country who are looking at the fact that the budget talks about infrastructure development, investments into private and public sectors, expansion of roads and so on and so forth. And also business growth is being targeted to a certain extent. Now those are the things that people believe will likely lead to positive growth, and therefore they believe that that return will be sufficient for the government to really meet its income and expenditure targets. But there are others who are equally worried about topics like corruption, inflation, wastage in the overall economy, and definitely a high government expense. And these are the people who have the fear that the government will not be able to really hold up to its commitment on the income and expenditure targets.
Your exclusive island-wide survey reveals that the budget is generally viewed in a positive light. Now, could you elaborate on which budget provisions they find favourable?
Well, again, given the fact that these are really initial days as far as it comes to the budget, the key things that people are still talking about are slightly general. The investment into the education sector, the overall thrust and focus on infrastructure is another thing. It seems that to a certain extent, while limited, but the public sector salary increase has also worked in the favor of overall positivity towards the budget. So those are some of the key things that people are reacting to.
What are the perceived negatives of the 2012 budget?
The negatives are again nothing new, Anushan. It's the same old bugbears that continue to haunt us time after time: corruption, inflation, wastage, and a fact that overall the competitiveness of the country is still questionable are some of the key questions that lead people to feel that the budget somehow is not really doing enough. There is, in addition to that, there is also the concern that from the private sector point of view, not enough has really been done. Because people, it appears from the surveys that we have talked about in the past that there were high expectations in terms of some of the budget provisions addressing key needs of the private sector. But what we are getting now from the respondents is that it's not really met the target there.
That was TNS Lanka's outgoing country manager Kunal Sharma in conversation with Benchmark's Anushan Selvaraja. That's our show this week. We do hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your company.